Hey, this is Jake, and welcome to my very first Q&A video. I've gotten quite a few questions over the last few months as I started this YouTube channel, and I've answered some of them in the threads, but I've gotten a lot that I figured could use a little bit more elaboration, and that takes way too much typing. So if you want to find your way into these videos in the future, you can get a hold of me on Twitter. I'm taking questions there, obviously in the comments here, and also through my Patreon. Those are the questions that get prioritized to videos like this. So I want to start off. The first question is from Ferry, and Ferry says, I saw that you're using Reason as a DAW, and as an experienced youngster, that's a compliment, what kind of software do you propose to use for making advanced types of music? I mean, not only loops and beats, with all respect to the Fruity Loops guys. I really do recommend using Reason as a DAW. I think you can really produce an entire song in that and still have it sound professional. A good example of that is the song on my channel, Armageddon, that's mainly electronic, and I programmed that all in Reason, but there are real guitars that come in on that song, and the main riff that you hear, that weird plinky, Middle Eastern-y kind of thing, is actually done with a guitar recorded directly into Reason, and then chopped up using some of the cool effects that the Reason Dr. Octorex sampler has to offer. So I was able to reverse like specific slices of my playing. I was able to adjust the octave and the filter on each one of those slices. Lots of cool stuff like that. And I really think Reason's very versatile. I think it's a fairly cheap price too for a level of software like that. And I've had zero technical issues with it. I've had zero hardware or software issues with it. It's a very stable program. And they're not paying me to say this. I am just a huge fan of Propellerhead's Reason. Honestly, it's just great software to use. However, you will see me using Ableton as well, because I am more comfortable doing live orchestration, like live instruments, vocals, and guitar and bass. I am more comfortable doing that in Ableton and processing that signal in Ableton Live. However, as soon as it leaves the guitar or the bass or the vocals, I'm pretty much in Reason the entire time. So for creating sound effects or creating synth lines, all that sort of stuff. So I highly recommend the program. So Rodrigo Castillo, on my video about Mixolydian Flat 6, he said, I think maybe you shouldn't be telling people to not use the diminished chords, as you might be inadvertently telling them to not explore stuff that sounds weird. And you're totally right. I shouldn't tell you to not use diminished chords, and I hope it didn't come across that way. You should be exploring with everything, especially if it's completely harmless, like something like a diminished chord, But the purpose of my videos is to try to get to like the fun stuff right away. I don't want to wade through lots and lots of, boring rules and theory just to get stuff that sounds good. And for most people, it's a little easier to sound good when you're avoiding things like diminished chords and augmented chords. Those have their place, and obviously as a musician, you want to study and advance to that level. But if you already kind of have a mastery of that stuff, then you're probably not watching videos like this to learn more about composition. So, I'm trying to kind of balance that between getting right to the point and having the fun stuff, and also skirting around the advanced theory concepts that, maybe these videos will get into later on. Foamertack says, who cares about the concept? I wrote heart-pulling songs using this cadence without the knowledge, but with the feeling. So he's talking about my video on the minor plagal chord change, which is when you go from a major 4 chord to a minor 4 chord, and then back to the 1. And really the minor plagal is just the minor 4 to the 1 there. And that's great, man. That's great that you wrote a song without having the knowledge and still having the feeling in there. The problem is that when you want to repeat that, having the knowledge really helps out. You know what I mean? If I want to do that same effect in the key of G, I know how to do it. I know that, hey, my 4 chord is C, so I'll just borrow the 4 chord of C minor, and then I'll resolve back to 1. And I'll just get that same effect. So the knowledge helps me replicate this stuff. It helps me communicate it to other musicians. I can say, hey, we're borrowing the 4 chord. I can say, play me the minor 4 chord. They know what I'm talking about, and it's easy to transpose. So the knowledge is very helpful, and it doesn't hold me back from writing that in the future. So in my opinion, there's really no reason to be proud of the fact you don't have the knowledge, and there's really no reason to just not absorb that knowledge, because it's just going to make it easier to replicate those things later on in the future. The Low Ender asks, isn't Mixolydian a mode? Why do you keep referring to it as a key? You did the same with minor harmonic. I heard their scales. You're absolutely right. They are, Mixolydian is a mode, but I also like to think of it as a key, and that's an important concept. Yes, Mixolydian is the same thing as playing a major scale, just starting on the 5th note. But that to me loses the point. That misses the whole point of composing with Mixolydian and pretending that it's its own key. All right, when you treat something like it's its own key, then you have a tonic, and you're kind of exploring things around that tonic, and you're finding a way to get back to that tonic. And when you do that off of the 5th tone, like in Mixolydian, the effect The whole package is a different effect than if you were just doing that in major or minor or Dorian. So yes, they're all related. Yes, Mixolydian is the 5th mode of the major scale. But I also want people to think of Mixolydian as being its independent key, its own thing. Just imagine in a parallel universe somewhere, the very first scale you're taught as a kid is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, with a flat 7 like that instead. There's no reason that that's not our major scale. It just happens to be that way in this country, that the major scale is the big one. But I think it's important to treat the other ones just as equally, with the exception of Locrian. And speaking of Locrian, Mayemi no Yume asks, or mentions, I disagree about Locrian. There's use to Locrian, and it can feels really special and delicate. Just don't try to compare it with anything, and don't start with a goal. Just accept what Locrian has to say, and feel its color the way it is. If you try to label Locrian, you'll probably fail, because Locrian is special. For me, Locrian is very delicate and deep. I will try to make a piece using Locrian later. I wish you the best of luck in your goal to make a Locrian piece. It's difficult. But you're right, I can't disagree with anything you said. If Locrian is delicate and deep to you, then there's no way I can argue with that. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to find your own personal connotations with these things. Just because I find a minor chord to be dark doesn't mean that you have to use the word dark. You might actually think of it as less dark and more sedating. You know what I mean? Or you might think of it as less sedative and more curious, okay? Whatever word comes to mind, that's the word you want to be using, because it's your brain, and that's what you're trying to do is have your brain respond to a note or a chord or a cluster of, like a scale, you know what I mean? And then when it responds that way, you know, oh, when I think of curiosity, I'm usually dealing with a minor chord. So it's a very valid technique, and it's completely personal. It's completely subjective. So, you know, for me, I might think of Lydian as floaty and spacey. You might think of it as really, you know, disturbing and disoriented, whatever, okay? Or if it reminds you of a memory or makes you think of a place, use those things, but that's totally subjective. Jason McDaniel asks, here's my question. You assigned major and minor chords to each root in the scale, but you didn't explain why. Is this just the established rule with the major scale, or was that your choice just for this example? What are the rules if I wanted to say write in Phrygian? So that's a great question, and I do breeze past a lot of this stuff in my videos. I'm going to do a video on building diatonic formulas and building, you know, the chord formulas for each one of these keys. Long story short, the notes of the scale dictate what chords I'm allowed to play, all right? So I really can't play, you know, a minor 1, for example. It's just not allowed. There's just no, that note doesn't exist there. So if you really look at the triads that are available to me in that key, then the formula kind of builds itself. I will expand on that concept later on, so if that's not a great answer, I understand. Larry King says, you're an idiot. And I legitimately lulled when I saw this, just the combination of the avatar and the text. That's a good troll. Mark Smith, you have a voice for radio. Did you ever pursue being a DJ? I have not pursued being a DJ. I did do some freelance voiceover work in the past. I would love to get a job in voiceover. I think it would be the greatest thing ever to just get paid to talk. So, you know, I keep the door open on that. But the voiceover industry, from my experience, it takes a lot of motivation. You have to be pretty, unless you're signed already, unless you have an agency, you kind of have to be knocking on doors and sending demo reels everywhere. And I really haven't been doing that. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And lastly, on my video about the unnameable rhythm, Head Over Water says, isn't this a 3/4 polyrhythm? And in the video, I explicitly say, yeah, this is a 3/4 polyrhythm with an extra quarter note added at the end. And that's why I think that rhythm sounds so interesting, is because it's not just a continued polyrhythm. Continued polyrhythms can get kind of disorienting. So adding on that extra beat at the end really helps out a lot. So just going over a few little things here for you guys. I hope you got something out of this, and I will do videos like this more frequently. I'm planning on doing these Q&As once every 2 weeks. I know it's a little light on content, but like I said, I want to answer these questions without going in the detail of making a huge, detailed, edited video. So if you do have simple questions like this, please leave a comment down below or get a hold of me through my Patreon or my Twitter page, and I will plan on seeing you soon.